Hi everyone, it's Eliana and I have a Christmas card to share with you today. I really liked the way that this card turned out, so I'm kind of excited to share it with you. I am starting off with the Concord in 9th plaid background stamp, and I'm just going to stamp it onto some red cardstock. I am using the Fawn Jet Black ink, and the reason why I'm using that one instead of my favorite Onyx black ink or black onyx ink, whichever it is. It's because I noticed that when I did a dry run of this card that the onyx black ink took forever to dry. So I started off with the jet black. I think my ink pad is a little bit dry and I don't have a reinker for it. So it took me several coats to get a solid impression. And I also noticed that the red cardstock, I noticed that it had texture on it, so it wasn't exactly smooth. So you could see where the paper wasn't making contact with the ink, and it was because of the texture. So I had to try really hard to get it completely covered. I am going to do one more coat just so that I could cover up that last spot, and I am finally happy with the stamping, and I am just going to set that one aside to dry. I had already stamped several panels because I made multiples of these, and so you can see how it dried back just a little bit, but it's still okay. I am coating this with my embossing tool just so that the embossing powder doesn't stick to it, so I'm just testing it out to make sure that it is completely dry. And once I'm satisfied that it's going to not stick, I am just going to trim this down, and I'm trimming it down to 4 by 5 1/4. Now I've already mounted the thin lines from that same stamp set from the Concord in 9th plaid background. I've already mounted those onto my MISTI, and I'm just going to line those up so that it goes directly across the center part of the design. I am using my creative corner to keep it centered, and I'm just going to use some Delicata Gold Glitz ink to stamp with. That way, in case that my stamping or I don't get enough embossing powder on my project, you could still see the gold underneath instead of, you know, a bald spot. Excuse me. I'm just going to work my way down the card, and when I get to the bottom, I'm just going to remove my creative corner. Once I worked all the way through, I'm just going to flip it around so I can get the other part. Now once I'm done with the stamping these horizontal lines, I'm going to emboss it, and the reason why I'm going to add my powder instead of doing the perpendicular lines, it's because it's a lot easier to remove any stray pieces of embossing powder when it's only going in one direction, and you'll see in a little bit how I do that. So I'm just going to coat this with some pale gold embossing powder. And I'm just going to take a dry brush and I'm just going to run it right up alongside. So if I would have had those lines going the opposite direction, I wouldn't be able to run my brush all the way down. So it made it a lot easier to do it this way. And once I'm done removing any stray embossing powder, I'm going to go ahead and heat set that with my heat gun. And then I'll go back and add my perpendicular lines. So to do that, you can see that the stamp does go all the way across. So I'm just going to line things up, and I'm just going to stamp it the exact same way as before. And I'm not going to show that part because it's the exact same thing. So I just edited it out so that the video wouldn't be so long. Now, I did get some strays, even though I spent a lot of time removing them with my brush. But I did use my craft knife and I just picked at them and they came off really easily. Now I'm taking my Scrap Perfect towel and I'm just buffing out all of the embossing tool powder. It's that white powder that you use. So I just buffed it out. Now I'm just taking my mini MISTI out and I'm just lining up a sentiment from the Lawn Fawn Winter Unicorn. I just need the word Christmas, and so I lined it up in between the grid lines because the grid line is 1/4 of an inch apart, and so that way I could take a 1/4 of an inch strip and line it up and my sentiment will be centered. It's really hard to stamp on those little tiny strips, and so the mini MISTI works great for those little tiny pieces. Usually by the time I am partway through a project, my desk is full of supplies, and so finding a little spot to stamp on, it takes some time to move supplies around. So having a little mini MISTI just for these little small sentiments really helps. Now I'm going to take a little tiny brush. It's called a spotter brush, and I found it at Hobby Lobby. I just went down their aisle that has all the brushes and I tried to find the tiniest brush, and so having this little brush works really great. I mean, there are just a handful of bristles, and so removing stray embossing powder from sentiments is really easy with this little spotter brush, and it's very inexpensive. Now I am going to take some Stickit Tape and I'm going to adhere it to my black cardstock. And this is just spare cardstock, just scraps that I have in my folder. And so I'm just going to use these spare pieces to cut out multiple words so I could stack them. And I'm using the word Mary, and it was a free die cut that I got from Concord and 9th for placing an order, but it is available for sale. I really like the script, and so I cut it out several times with the black, and then I cut it out with some gold glitter paper, and now I'm just layering them all together. So I layered about four of the black pieces and then this beautiful gold glitter piece, and I'm just stacking them together. And then once I'm happy with the placement, I'm just going to squeeze it together between my fingers so that it's all lined up. I've mounted my plaid background onto some black cardstock, and now I'm just removing the release paper from the back of my die cut, and I'm just going to center it onto my card panel and just press it down. Now I have my little tiny strip that I've trimmed down, and I'm just going to take some black foam adhesive. I like using this one because it kind of is camouflaged. And so I'm just cutting a couple of strips, and then the part of the strip that is going to overhang on the Y, I'm just going to add a little squirt of multi-matte medium. And so I'm just going to position it right underneath and press it down. And you could leave it at that. It's a nice masculine card, but I wanted to add a little bit more, so I'm adding some gold sequins, and these are some gold sequins from Lucy Abrams' Little Things. And so I'm just adding a little bit of a squirt of the multi-matte and using my crystal katana to add them on. If you're having any trouble using your crystal katana, if you just twist it between your fingertips, it kind of warms it up and it helps to pick up those little pieces. And I did complete this card. I also couldn't decide whether to use some foil paper, some foil cardstock, so I did one of each, so be sure to leave some comments below on which one you liked, the glitter or the foil. And thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.